Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're jumping into an exciting what if Naruto joins Akatsuki parents alive. Part 1. If you enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, make sure to comment down below. Before we begin, don't forget to support the channel for more awesome content. Leave a like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, make sure to check out the description and my playlist for more amazing videos. Alright, let's get started. Chapter 1. Don't turn away from me. Two of the three living founding members of the Akatsuki were having an argument. The man with pale red hair and ominously glowing purple ringed eyes made to storm out of the Amikage's office, away from the person he was arguing with, before he could do something he would regret to his best friend, but the other person refused, grabbing Nagato by his shoulder and forcing him to turn around to face him. This man was as imposingly tall as the Amikage, and he faced a hateful Rinnegan glare with his own glare, his cerulean blue eyes narrowing. He was wearing the robes of the Akatsuki, something Conan thought of after they had defeated Hanzo of the Salamander barely 2 months ago. He had dull blonde hair that flopped down his head to the nape of his neck and fringed heavily over his right eye, reaching down to his chin. Over his mouth and nose was a black half-face mask that had pearly white teeth grinning evilly, a grisly thing to behold for any of his enemies, and these bared painted teeth looked even scarier as the man scowled when Nagato slapped his hand from his shoulder. The purple-haired angel of Amigakure, Conan moved between both cage-level ninjas quickly and fought to push them apart as they butted heads over her own head. "Guys," she pleaded, breaking her stoic mask and worryingly, frantically, looked between both of her childhood friends. "Please calm down. I let you desecrate Yahiko's body, Nagato." The masked blonde snarled, jabbing his finger at the Rinnegan god's face, very much unafraid and not in the least bit intimidated when Nagato's eyes glowed with ill intent. "I looked away when you dug him up and used him as one of your Rinnegan puppets." He spat, his voice came out clearly in spite of the fear-imposing mask covering his lower face. "Now your grand plan to attain world peace is to blow it up. The combine all 9 beasts and pointed at the planet. Do you know how many levels of crazy that is?" Nagato barely pushed down the urge to crush his friend with gravity and growled. "Don't talk to me about crazy, Naruto." Conan was now desperate, holding them apart from ripping each other to shreds. "Naruto, Nagato, we can resolve this." "No, we can't." The masked ninja named Naruto grated. "He comes up with the craziest riskiest plan, and those plans almost end up with all of us dead or dying." The Amikage was adamant. "The world needs to learn how to behave. If creating a nuclear-level threat is the only solution, then so be it." "There he goes again, spitting rubbish. Just like your plan for killing Hanzo, huh? Do you remember that?" He saw Nagato waver and Naruto pointed outside the window at the recuperating village, where it rained heavily and the people were shuffling around, still trying to get a bearing of what had happened a few months ago. "It destroyed half of our home, ruined hundreds of lives, and severed 2 major alliances to the village. You went with the plan. You could have left and yet you didn't." He didn't raise his voice, like Naruto, though it still carried enough venom. "I told you we could lead Hanzo away from the village and kill him in Suna, where he's weakest, but you said you wanted him at his best. You wanted him where everyone could see you kill him. You wanted the people to know you're the new Kage." Naruto slowly deflated and he exhaled through his nose. "Yahiko died because of you. Don't you dare say that. My student would have lost her life too if I wasn't there." The masked man continued as if he wasn't interrupted. He shook his head sadly and his eyes dimmed at the thought of losing his one and only student. He was put on the spot by Hanzo on who he would rather save, Yahiko or his student, and he chose the girl as his best friend impaled himself with his kunai. That situation could have been avoided entirely if Nagato listened to him for once. Tired shadows gathered under his eyes and he closed them, sighing. "Your pride will be your downfall, Nagato." He hesitated, looking at his glaring friend with somber eyes and raising his hands in surrender. "I will have no part of your plan. I'm done covering for you. Didn't need you anyway. You know where the door is. Get lost." He jabbed his thumb over his shoulder and Conan moved in front of Naruto as he made to walk out, gently keeping him from walking by pushing her hands against his chest. "Naruto, no, we need you." She pleaded and her dark brown eyes softened. Naruto observed her for a moment before he shot a quick look at Nagato, bent down to her ear and whispered. "Hell need you. Look after him." He straightened up and brushed past her. His cool eyes didn't change as he heard the woman sniff behind him. He closed the door behind him and mentally began planning in how he was going to pack his things because he didn't want to see Nagato travel deeper and deeper into the abyss of his own creation. The 17-year-old jumped in surprise when he turned back around, face to face with his student. She wore the same Akatsuki garb as her teacher and she didn't look that much younger than him, maybe even just 3 years younger. She had the same lower face mask as Naruto, but hers was simply plain red, and she had long, soft white hair that reached her hips and two fang-like bangs that reached her pale hidden cheeks. Her curious red eyes shone even in the dim lighting of the hallway outside of the Amikage's office, and the girl looked up at her teacher without much emotion on her face. I was coming back from the medical ward because some civilian caught a disease while digging up a house. She raised a perfectly curved eyebrow, and Naruto walked past her. She hurried up to his side, making sure to walk a step behind him with hurried steps. Did something happen in there? Oh, you know, Nagato's gone mad and Conan's going along with him, the usual. He flippantly answered the expressionless white-haired teen, and the girl treaded lightly after him, her large Akatsuki robe making muted rustling sound with each step. He looked at her from the corner of his eyes, noticing that she was wearing a larger robe than the one she usually did. This one covered her hands and rose up to under her chin, where her lower face was protected by the half-mask. She was also wearing stainless silver-colored leggings, so he couldn't see her toes either. He wondered if it had anything to do with her bloodline. She furrowed her eyebrows softly and tugged his elbow. "What do you mean, Naruto-sensei?" "Nothing you should worry about, Sueki." He exhaled. He laughed quietly when the girl still tugged on his elbow, calling for his attention. Nah, then where are you going?" "I'm leaving AIM." It seemed the gravity of his words didn't really disturb her that much, as Naruto, his best friends and she had spent most of their lives in rain. She simply shrugged, still holding his elbow and walked skipping after him in the poor light leading towards his room. "Okay, I only need 5 minutes to pack." "I think you should stay back." His student's answer was an immediate no. Naruto felt a groan coming up and he came to a stop, something that made his eagerly trailing though blank-faced apprentice run into his back. She moaned quietly and rubbed her nose over the mask with her free left hand, looking up interestedly to the back of her teacher's head. "I'm not going to force you to come." "I know, that's why I'm coming anyway." She said it so easily and with the most honest smile, a smile that shone through her bright red eyes and brightened up her pale face. It made the mask teacher scoff. He was the one that taught her that eye smile technique. He studied her for a moment, mulling it over in his mind and ultimately reaching the decision that even if he ran away at the dead of night, she would find a way to track him. He couldn't shake her when she was a toddler, he couldn't shake her when he started learning from Orochimaru, and he couldn't shake her when he went out on blind dates outside of AIM, in Rain Country, for the girl would invite herself to the table and take up all of the Naruto's attention from his date. The girl was fixated on him and he didn't know why. Against what should be expected with a devoted stalker like his student, she was nice company and she was there when he needed someone. His sighed in defeat and her eyes lit up again. "Alright, fine. Get your stuff ready and meet me at the west gate." "Great." She breezily hugged the tall blonde and ran back the way they came from to her room on the opposite side of the tower. The ghost of AIM sat down on his bed with a huff and a misty blackness ebbed from his back. The puff of darkness disconnected from his body and formed two clones, both of which had black-eyed with dark redder eyes instead of sky blue. The clones began gathering his things from his room while the real shinobi stared at the 3 pictures he had on his walls. There was one of him as a 5-year-old with his dead parents, clinging onto his father's left leg and angrily pointing, roaring at the cameraman to not take the picture, as his mother covered her mouth to hide her laughter, and his father rolled his eyes in frustration, shaking his leg for his boy to get off him. A small smile came to his face when he remembered his younger self. He was wilder and more rebellious, insisting on his own way and no other way. That picture was taken a week before they moved from Darkness, or Dark Country, to AIM at the peak of Darkness's civil war. His parents had seen the move as better than staying at the war-torn country because no other country wanted anything to do with dark refugees. His father, a tall man that often wore a scarf around his mouth and had black hair with blue eyes, promised that AIM would be better than Darkness, and his mother, his sweet mother, a beauty with equally blue eyes and soft rose petal-smelling blonde hair, agreed to move. Naruto had no friends in Darkness, as people were more concerned with either fighting the government or surviving the random bombings, so the boy only wanted the family to settle down in a place that didn't pose any daily danger to their lives. They stayed in the same town as his childhood friends, Yahiko, Nagato and Conan, on the far outskirts of AIM, far from the conflict in Darkness, and also away from the global war waging within Amigakure. That time he moved he hid most of his face under a scarf, like his father, and so the 5 friends didn't know how he looked for a number of years. Another picture was of him, 11 years old and wearing a mud-splattered black shirt and black pants with blue sandals, a red scarf around his face, and holding a fighting stance across from his opponent, an orange-haired boy that grinned teasingly, wearing a similar style of clothing. The ghost rubbed his eyes as he laughed at the memory. Yahiko had challenged him to a fight, claiming that Jiraiya's teachings were superior to Orochimaru's. Naruto didn't care much for the fight, so he declined, but Yahiko, that lovable idiot, thought blindsiding the student of Orochimaru with a ball of mud was a good idea. hence the twitch in young Naruto's right eye and the smoky darkness behind him. That picture was 4 years after they had all lost their parents and 2 years after two of the legendary Sannin picked them to be their apprentices. Jiraiya went with Nagato, Yahiko and Konan, and Naruto refused because he didn't want the Toad Sage's attention to be too divided. The last picture was of him standing in the heavy rain, with his right arm around her shoulder and playfully tousling his student's wet white hair with his other hand, beaming at the camera. Sueki was giving him a side-eyed glare and crossing her arms. Both of them were wearing their half-masks and wearing the Akatsuki garb, seeing as they were about to enter AIM to fight Hanzo, the then Amikage. Naruto was, and is, 17 years old. The story of him finally accepting the white-haired girl into their circle of friends made the cage-ranked ninja chuckle and stand up, accepting his bag from one of his clones, dispersing it back into dark release chakra. Tragedy truly brought out the best and worst in people. For the longest time Naruto had been content with staying in the background, behind his 3 best friends, and allowing them to take most of the credit while he watched their backs, protected them from any of their mistakes blowing up in their faces, and put his body on the line, so that they wouldn't die. That was how much Naruto treasured them. Wherever they messed up, Naruto appeared and picked the slack, so none of them got hurt. That was one of the reasons he was called the Ghost of AIM. He was an entity that couldn't be comprehended and left a trail of bodies after him when, even if you looked hard enough, you wouldn't see him at all. He wore a mask for the most part of his life, and he stayed in the shadows of his more public friends. All they knew was that no enemy who managed to get near Yahiko, Konan or Nagato would get any closer before they inexplicably died. Especially Nagato. Before he got his Rinnegan, Nagato had the habit of picking fights he couldn't physically or mentally measure up to. That was what Naruto had come to meet when he moved to AIM. The boy with blonde hair and wearing a long scarf around his neck, mouth and nose, raised an eyebrow and crouched down onto his right knee, ignoring the light rain pouring down on him in cold waves. He was staring at a red-haired boy yelling at the top of his lungs at 3 bigger boys, who looked to be about 9 or 10, surrounding the boy as they pushed him about. "Leave me alone." The redhead blindly swung his fist, and it slightly clipped one of the bigger boys. The boy that had been hit spat and drove his fist deep into the weak boy's stomach, savoring as Nagato coughed and whimpered, holding his sore belly and falling onto his knees. Naruto hummed and his lips turned down when one of the 3 boys kicked Nagato's back. He was obviously not a threat again, why hit him while he was down? The 3 bullies had initially come to the boy for his pocket money, and instead of giving them, Nagato had called their mothers. A word Naruto's mother would have murdered him over if he ever said it. Naruto knew bullying. The 3 boys came with smiles and laughter, genially asking for the boy's money. It was in the playground of the civilian school in the town, but the darkness-born boy knew no place was safe from bullies. Naruto closed his eyes and sighed when the other 2 joined in and began dropping blow after blow on the smaller boy's curled-up body. The other kids looked away from the blatant bullying, and the blonde instinctively knew that if they intervened then they too would be ganged up on. He stood up from the small hill he was crouched on and walked to the gang beating, saying over the rain, "Hey, that's enough. You've got what you want." The boy that began the volley of kicks looked up with a deep scowl, looking over Naruto's face covering and his hand-me-down clothes. "Who the heck are you supposed to be? This has nothing to do with you." The school was underfunded due to the war, so the teachers couldn't care less if Naruto reported him, so Naruto removed the option of reporting the bullying to them. They went back to attacking Nagato. Everyone gaped when Naruto dragged one of the boys back by the back of his shirt. "I said, that's enough." The boy he pulled back turned around and shoved the masked boy down, shouting, "That's it." He ambled to Naruto, and the boy scurried away from the larger boy. The other 2 bullies left Nagato's shaking form and followed the supposed leader of the group. Naruto wasn't fast enough, so the leader picked him up by the top of his shoulder, lifting him clear off the ground and yelled, "Should have minded your business, scarves." Naruto, who had formerly been wide-eyed and trying to pry the boy's hands off his shoulders, covered his mouth and giggled. "Scarves? Really?" The boy holding him up prepared to crack his knee into Naruto's gut, but the boy had already shot up his right leg, crashing it between the large boy's legs and felling him down so he could hold his throbbing groin in agony. Nagato looked at his savior with large eyes, watching as Naruto landed on his feet and quickly moved backwards when the 2 other bullies were trying to figure out what Naruto had just done. The mystery boy raised his fists and hopped on his feet, something he had seen his late uncle do when he was telling Naruto a story from his time as a ninja. The blonde paused and beckoned the confused pair to go, returning to his sloppy fighting position once again. The 2 bullies only surged to Naruto when the groaning boy on the ground yelled at them too. Naruto bent under a punch to his face and drove an unforgivable uppercut into the attacker's groin, dropping him down onto the ground to painfully cradle his aching nuts. Naruto continued his motion even as his second victim went down and scrambled away from the last bully's kick. He managed to get upright again, and the panting bully ran to him with murder in his eyes, ready to avenge his friends. The darkness-born boy reared his right leg back and met his aggressor first, striking his groin with such strength and accuracy, for a 5-year-old boy, that the latest victim leaped back a step with his hands cupped over his attacked groin and tumbled onto his back with a scream. The playground erupted in celebratory squeals, and Naruto smiled at his work. 3 larger boys rolling around on the ground and wailing. Nagato later met Nagato after school, flabbergasted beyond belief and hailing Naruto as his hero. He asked if they could be friends and Naruto agreed. Later that day Nagato introduced him to his other 2 friends. They were attending a shinobi school, Yahiko and Konan. AIM was in serious need for soldiers, and Hanzo reduced the recruitment age down to 5 years old, forcing healthy children to be mandatorily enlisted. Yahiko's father was a high-ranking shinobi directly under Hanzo, and Konan had an older cousin that was a successful medic, so them being made to attend the shinobi school was unsurprising. Nagato wasn't qualified to attend the school with his friends because he was too sickly and weak, so his destiny was to become civilian cannon fodder for the army, educated cannon fodder, but cannon fodder nonetheless. Naruto didn't mind more people his age to talk to, since those in his part of the town were elderly and unable to keep up with him. It was all going fine for them until a year later another couple from his home village, Darkness, moved into their town. Now, Darkness was a fairly large place so Naruto couldn't possibly know every person from there, and he certainly didn't know those newcomers. They were pale, like all of the populace in Darkness, and they possessed quirks special to people from Darkness, but he didn't know them, and Konan and Yahiko rudely thinking that all people from Darkness knew each other couldn't change that fact. Naruto's parents hit it off with their fellow Darkness comrades, but Naruto didn't warm up to the nice couple's peculiar 3-year-old child, Katsuki Sakanomi. Konan murmured, leaning close to Naruto and whispering. She's following you. Again. Naruto inhaled shakily, covering up his frustration into a worrying twitch of his right eyebrow. He released the air through his hidden mouth and shook his head, placing his hands behind his head and slinking with his female best friend as they went towards Yahiko's house. Just ignore her. She'll leave. Eventually. She didn't. She stalked the boy for 5 more blocks. He spied a red twinkle from the corner of his eye. A girl with white hair messily wrapped her mouth and peeking out from the side of a failing bookstore. She squeaked when she noticed Naruto had seen her and ducked back into the alley. Covering her head and trembling with her eyes tightly clenched shut. The bottom of her damp flowery yellow and white dress was speckled with grass, showing that she had followed Naruto as he and Konan leisurely walked through the park and mud, meaning she passed through the same puddles as the older children. When she thought Naruto had gone she slowly opened her eyes and turned her head, still covering her head with her small hands, to look out of the alley. She jumped back when an unimpressed, incredibly annoyed Naruto stood before her with his sparkling blue eyes dark with irritation and his forehead crinkled deeply. I told you to leave me alone. Do you want me to hit you? He said, waving his fist in front of the cowering girl. She mutely shook her head. Konan placed her hand on Naruto's forearm and gently pushed it down. Naruto, stop, you're scaring her. He removed his hand from her grasp, glad she couldn't see his cheeks flush at the contact. Good. She should be scared. He waved his hand and turned away from the red-eyed girl, continuing his and Konan's trek to Yahiko's house. Get lost, weirdo. Sueki fled from Naruto, and he thought that had finally done it. But it hadn't. Matter of fact, the stalking had gotten worse starting the very next day when Naruto's parents hosted Sueki's parents for early lunch and allowed the little girl into Naruto's room while the boy was coming back from school. She rummaged through his things and tried to decipher his elementary-level textbooks and his jottings, memorizing his chicken scrawl-like handwriting and taking her time to rub her face into Naruto's pillow so as to absorb his smell and also leave hers behind. She learned the bare basics of how to read and write within the next few weeks from her parents, a feat that shocked them, and she utilized the little she could do every day. Sueki pursed her lips and pointed her pen at a dirty pink thing wiggling in the mucky grass of the park. Was it? Naruto eyed the tiny girl at his side, running as quickly as her small legs could go after the boy that was walking as quickly as possible from her. He looked at the creature she was pointing at and walked on. Worm. Her tongue stuck out from the corner of her mouth and she wrote in her gradually soaking notebook. Woo. She looked up at him when she suddenly remembered, asking. Naruto-sensei, spell woo-worm. The boy tiredly grumbled. I'm not your sensei. I'll spell it for you. Yahiko exclaimed from Naruto's other side, shoving the blonde out of the way and smiling brightly at the white-haired girl. If there was a way for looks to torture and kill, then Yahiko would have died a horrible painful death. Sueki frostily narrowed her eyes at the orange-haired 6-year-old and gripped her pen tighter in her hands. Yahiko stepped back, surprised, and cleared his throat when the girl didn't speak, only glaring death at him. In an even more puzzling turn of events, she threw down her book and pen in outrage and, copying something she had seen Naruto do on numerous occasions, she clenched her fists and threw them forward. This time Naruto slipped before his confused friend and held Suiki back by her face, making the irate 3-year-old wildly swing her fists in a fruitless attempt at tagging who she thought was the orange-haired boy. Nagato crowed with laughter. "I think you got her mad, Yahiko." He joined Conan and waggled his eyebrows teasingly at the tired blonde. "I know one way to calm her down." Naruto sighed and muttered. "Shut up, idiots." He was honestly tired of chasing the girl away, and he was tired of running away. He was tired of her looking at him like he was some kind of gift from the heavens, always coming to him with questions and for help. He was tired of the assumptions his friends made. That Suiki had a crush on him. Naruto scoffed. "Ridiculous. She's just being a weirdo, like always." Suiki pushed and fought against his hand, preventing her from futilely wailing on his friend. "A creepy weirdo freak that won't stop stalking me." He rubbed the bridge of his nose with his other hand's pointer finger and thumb and said. "Stop, okay?" Realizing it wasn't Yahiko but Naruto that was keeping her back, Suiki suddenly stopped and her expressionless face gave nothing away. "Okay. WORM worm. Are you happy?" He grumbled as he released her face. She picked up her book and scribbled the words in, bobbing her head. "Yes, I am." Suiki, from what Naruto knew, wasn't much on smiling or showing any emotions for that matter. The most he could get from her, since she now had a red bandana over her lower face, were the infinitesimally changes in her blood-red eyes when she was pleased or displeased with something. Now her eyes glittered and she pushed her book into his face, asking. "Is this it?" He could hardly read what she had written, but he still nodded. "Yeah, sure." The group went on, Yahiko quickly getting over his hurt feelings when Conan asked him if he had orange juice at his house. Suiki pointed at a brown mound that distinctively looked and smelled different than mud. "Was it dog poo?" Only a year later did catastrophe strike and the dreaded Great Shinobi War reach their peaceful town. A squad of samurai flooded into the town one day, took down the town's civilian guards. They hid among them, and a day later Iwa, Aim's shaky ally, came around to coax the samurais out. The fight had been long drawn out and it was out of control. Nagato's parents were initially killed gruesomely by the samurai because they were stopping the Iron Country soldiers from looting their house, and Yuhiko's father was away at the war front with Hanzo, and seeing as the orange-haired boy didn't have any mother he couldn't stay alone. So they ran to Naruto's home and hid with their friend's family. The next day, when Naruto's parents were ushering them out of the house so they could flee to Fire Country, his parents stepped on an active mine set up by Iwa Shinobi. The only thing going through Naruto's mind, as he fought the urge to look at the bloody, scattered remains of his parents, was to calm his friends down and find a good place to hide until everything calmed down. In his search of refuge, after stowing a passed-out Nagato and Yahiko under an ignorable shrub, he found Conan blankly cradling her mother's head. He gently pried the head from her arms and gave her a tight hug, providing human warmth in the only way a recently orphaned 6-year-old child could provide, and it allowed his best friend to cry. He supported the listless catatonic purple-haired girl around the town as he cautiously checked for any more fighting or danger in general. The Iwa ninjas and Iron Country samurai had taken their conflict further away, but the devastation they had left behind ruined any sort of normalcy. Houses had fallen into themselves and bodies of innocent people littered the ground, parts strewn around carelessly from samurai that could care less of casualties and ninjas that didn't mind ending innocent lives as long as that helped kill a few samurai. He found Suiki ineffectively pulling at a pale hand from under a pile of rubble and twisted metal that used to be her family's house. She wasn't smiling or crying or showing any emotions whatsoever. It was like she already knew that she was holding a lifeless hand in her own, but she still couldn't accept the fact that her parents were gone. Naruto watched her sniff and mutter for her father and mother to come out for a minute before he went to her. He couldn't for the life of him leave her, no matter how annoying she was. He had to hold her in his arms for a few long minutes before she tentatively responded by pressing her face into his chest and embracing him back. She made no sound, but her body shook with the tears that refused to come out. Naruto was just happy she was alive. The scarf-wearing boy carried the then 4-year-old girl on his front and Conan on his back. His whole body still felt the effects of the mine from 3 hours ago, and the combined weight of his two friends had his legs shaking under the effort, though he still powered through, steadily walking back to Nagato and Yahiko. He didn't comment too much when he saw that Nagato's eyes had changed from kind brown to an ominous blazing purple with black concentric circles. It wasn't funny how war forced children to grown up, not even as he looked back on it years into the future, and most definitely not when he was still experiencing it. For what felt like months, Yahiko, Conan, Nagato and Suiki were lost. They vacantly stared out at nothing, through the frigid cold nights and through the blisteringly hot days caused by living under crossfire. Their eyes lost the wonder and shine of childhood, the hope for the future, and the present determination to reach that hopeful future. They lost all of that. They lost everything, but they only had each other. They realized this when they finally began to notice the efforts of one of their friends in making sure they had somewhere livable to lay their heads at night and always had something to eat when they were unbearably hungry. Naruto was forced to grow up and care for his friends when they were processing how their lives could have gone up in flames so quickly. He snuck into enemy camp and stole food for his friends, endured the beatings they gave him on days he was unlucky and got caught, shuffled around on his own in search of a warm place to spend the night, far away from the eternally dangerous nights. He sacrificed his sleep so they could rest. He sacrificed his food so they could eat. He sacrificed his body so they wouldn't get hurt. Naruto only found out, after another consecutive night of sleeping without food, that protecting and caring for his vulnerable friends gave him something to do instead of dwelling on his own vulnerability. He questioned the point of his continued existence and his insignificance in the universe as a mere speck compared to juggernauts that shook the world with the smallest actions. The only thing he could do was ensure his friends lived, even if he was dead inside. It was the role he couldn't play, but the role he had to play, as his friends were too physically and mentally broken to do anything but kill themselves. Naruto was just as broken as they were, if not more so, but the awareness of his tiny existence forced him to make many personal sacrifices so that his friends' existences shone, never knowing that even in the darkness, he was still growing to be a giant star. Orochimaru wrote this about his lone student in a journal the Sannin forgot in AIM. Before the battle for AIM, Naruto found it and gave it to Sueki for safekeeping. She seemed to appreciate it, even more so with the words the future Newtonin wrote about her teacher. Life was crazy, and the ghost of AIM lived for his friends. The 7-year-old had to make do with what he had, which was absolutely nothing, and he managed this nothing for 2 painful years, making sure his friends kept their spirits up in spite of the terrible war going on around them. Sueki was the first to pull out of her daze, and she dutifully devoted her life to the person that had cared for her when she couldn't care for herself, learning from Naruto as if he was her only hope and eating everything he told her, like it would be her last time hearing his voice. She took learning from Naruto to another level, and Naruto was fine with that now. It was her way of coping. Who was he to judge? He didn't know that Sueki actively becoming his student, in her mind, went light years further than simply coping. Naruto had picked a half mask from a dead Suna shinobi and wore it instead of his scarf because Konan had caught a cold and he had been looking for a substitute for days before he could comfortably give his friend the scarf that hid his identity. This meant he gave Konan his shirt to use for extra warmth until he could get his shirt back and give her his scarf. Sueki adopted a similar half-face mask not even a week later. The Sannin showed up and Jiraiya offered to teach them all, but Naruto said no for himself. Yahiko, Nagato and Konan then went on to learn from the newly named Toad Sannin. Orochimaru was at the time feuding with Jiraiya for Tsunade's affections, so he chose Naruto to be his student, branching out this offer to Sueki, then 6 years old, but Naruto staunchly refused, saying that she was too young to learn ninja techniques. The Sannin quietly backed away when he discovered the young mask-wearing blonde had 2 very powerful bloodlines. Both Tsunade left for Konoha, Jiraiya and Orochimaru stayed back to train their new students, coming and going to different war fronts until, 5 years later, they were too busy with the war and hastily graduated their students to the stage of personal training. They were still on this stage, a year after the Sannin left, but they had used the skills they had acquired to defeat Hanzo the Salamander. And that fight was brutal. It ended with the 4 surviving friends all crossing out the AIM forehead protectors Nagato provided them as the new amicage over the grave of their fallen comrade. Naruto silently plodded through the rain and the shallow puddles, navigating through the back alleys from the Amikage's tower to the west gate of the highly industrialized village. The Akatsuki robe he still reached his mid-calf, so the rain only soaked into his black sandals, though he wasn't too bothered with them, seeing as he had grown up with the feeling of wet shoes. He flicked away the bang hanging over his right eye and looked out of an alley where a swarm of people huddled under a large tarp, distributing and collecting hot food. There was a small stir as a boy about 10 years old turned in his direction, catching the attention of who Naruto could guess was his brother and his sister, but no one else. They squinted to look into the pitch blackness of the alley and the low afternoon sun for who they thought they saw. The ghost shook his head slowly and placed his pointer finger on his mask, telling them not to speak. They gawked dumbly at who they saw. The legend that had aided in putting down their former tyrannical leader, and the only one they knew that could pose a challenge to the newly instated Amikage, the god of AIM. The 3 kids nodded and went back to eating their porridge. It was remarkable that they could even sense him. He walked backwards into the dark and his presence gradually left. A tendril of wispy smoke seeped out from the ground a mile from the west gate and formed into the mask-wearing blonde, who started walking at a casual pace westward. He was soon joined by Sueki, panting for air as she reached his side. "Didn't you say?" She closed her eyes and wheezed, tightly holding the back of his cloak in her small hands and blindly walking with him. "Meet you. At the gate." "I did." Naruto answered candidly. The girl, also still wearing the soon-to-be S-rank rogue organization's black with red clouds robe, didn't look to have any luggage or scrolls on her person. Like her mentor, she sealed her storage scroll into a storage seal painted onto her right upper arm, but unlike her teacher, she had to run a mile in 5 seconds to reach his position. She got her breath and curtly walked at her master's side, moving a step behind out of a sort of respect for him. Was it a test? Yup. She blanched. Did I pass? He didn't look at her as he answered. No. Swaki's less than pleased mood came into her eyes as she lowered the burning red orbs to the ground, disappointed in herself. From years of knowing her friend and her mentor, she knew when he was in a bad mood and she knew the consequences of prodding him during his bad moods. She sighed and remained silent, keeping her obvious question to herself. They were still within rain country territory and as such the rain still fell on them, though not as heavily as they were closer to Amigakure, the center of the developed country. The country itself was small and AIM made up 90% of it while small settlements surrounded the massive rain village. Nagato planned to merge it all together as well as imbue the natural rain with his chakra once AIM had gotten back to its feet. This was to increase security so that if invaders came from any direction, he would know from the beginning. The 3 surviving founders of the Akatsuki had so many plans for AIM to prosper and become a global powerhouse, worthy of challenging all the other major villages at once. Now that Nagato wanted to do something that would inevitably result in another great shinobi war and possibly end with the world destroyed, the ghost finally found the line he couldn't bring himself to cross to protect his Rinnegan-bearing friend. Ihiko wouldn't have wanted it if he was alive, Naruto knew that much, and Konan didn't want it, but the Angel of AIM followed Nagato because Nagato wouldn't let her go because of his and Naruto's promise to Ihiko. It was why Naruto didn't ask Konan to come with him. Nagato had her in a cage, and her frail, unadjusted mind told her that she should stay in his cage. Yahiko's death affected them all, even little Swaki, but it hit Konan worse. The whole thing was just too frustrating. He released a breath he didn't know he was holding, and Swaki felt his pent-up frustration leave his body. She liked her small lips and asked a voice very close to monotone. "So, where are we going?" His answer was enough to shatter her stoic expression and make her eyebrows shoot up into her hairline. "Kiri. Next time on Silent Night." He announced to them that he was going to end the war and bring their country back to normalcy. They were to focus their attention on expelling Fire Country and any other leeching foreign country from their country, which were Earth, Lightning and Waterfall, while the other countries that had not participated or contributed whatsoever in the violence, like River Country, Sun Agakure, which was their western neighbor, Kiri Agakure and Yuzushi Agakure, were to be left alone. They would establish a formal alliance with those 4 places after the war. The forced removal of the undesirables from their country was set down in history as the Purge. In Orochimaru's words, Naruto was a living anomaly. He had 2 naturally cooperative affinities, one of which was strong enough to be considered a bloodline, and these 2 affinities combined to form an extremely rare bloodline. "Give me a minute, crack." The whole bar was in chaos and if there weren't bodies littered on the floor, then the other patrons were either fleeing from the general vicinity of the insane ninja or were cowering under their tables. Naruto's blue eyes were dark and the intimidating beastly grin on his half-mask finally scared the downed man into the sweet bliss of unconsciousness. "You're drunk." Naruto growled lowly and swiped his hand back, pushing the white-haired girl away from him and readying another blow. "I'm not drunk, crack. I can't get drunk." She could see it in his vacant blue eyes, between each swallow of sake and rum. The emptiness and the purposelessness that wallowed in his dead orbs like silt at the bottom of a pond pool, muddying those formerly crystal clear and cheerful cerulean eyes. The void of life that had taken the place of direction and the daily settling depression and personal disgust at what used to be his life and what his life was now. Naruto was lost. Chapter 2. Despite being a girl that knew how to outwardly suppress her emotions, Swaki's forehead crinkled worriedly and she grabbed her teacher by the back of his featureless black cloak and tried to pull him back, but the stronger ninja held strong, his left hand clenched on the shirt of a downed man and his right hand balled into a tight fist. The man lying on the ground that Naruto was holding hacked painfully from his no doubt fractured ribs and his broken nose pulsed with fresh blood, pouring down his partially shattered jaw and onto the wooden floor. Naruto pulled the man up by his shirt and bashed his bruised fist against the other man's head, cracking him down to the ground, but Naruto wasn't satisfied as he lifted the man up again slightly, ready to break open the drunk's head. Swaki cried. "Sensei, no. Give me a minute, crack." The whole bar was in chaos and if there weren't bodies littered on the floor, then the other patrons were either fleeing from the general vicinity of the insane ninja or were cowering under their tables. Naruto's blue eyes were dark and the intimidating beastly grin on his half-mask finally scared the downed man into the sweet bliss of unconsciousness. "You're drunk." Naruto growled lowly and swiped his hand back, pushing the white-haired girl away from him and readying another blow. "I'm not drunk, crack. I can't get drunk." Sueki knew this very well, of her master's fast metabolism and his continuously active cells, but she unfailingly went back to him and this time wrapped her arms around his abdomen from behind and pulled him back with all her might. This couldn't compare to the blonde's strength and his right arm twitched to drive his elbow backwards into her temple so that she could just leave him to vent out his frustration. But even in his blind rage he couldn't do that, only releasing his grip on the man's shirt and holding down the urge to spit on him. He closed his eyes and breathed in slowly, exhaling slowly again. Sueki pressed closer and pushed her face into his back, between his shoulder blades, and closed her eyes as well. Naruto heard her voice, muffled from his cloak and her mask, and she whispered. "Let's get out of here. Before Kiri ninjas arrive." There was a thick silence after her silent words, and the excruciatingly sober former shinobi of AIM rubbed his forehead. "Fine." He gave the man on the floor a parting kick to his ribs and mumbled. "I was done here anyway." The night had started like how every night for the past 3 months had started. With Naruto leaving the shared apartment they had in hidden mist and stumbling into any bar that hadn't banned him to waste away his night, drowning his soul in self-loathing and alcohol. Sueki knew there would be a blowback from leaving AIM, leaving their childhood friends, but she never anticipated for it to take this much of a toll on her sensei. She could see it in his vacant blue eyes, between each swallow of sake and rum. The emptiness and the purposelessness that wallowed in his dead orbs like silt at the bottom of a pond pool, muddying those formerly crystal clear and cheerful cerulean eyes. The void of life that had taken the place of direction and the daily settling depression and personal disgust at what used to be his life and what his life was now. Naruto was lost. The hollow pain he should have felt after losing his parents, after losing his childhood, after losing Yahiko, after losing the one thing that kept him together for all those years since then. Naruto was lost. He didn't know what to do with himself, and thinking of the life he had left behind was akin to torment, remembering the extents he would go through to ensure his friends were safe and content. Recalling how his parents promised, every night they tucked him into bed, that they would be there for him forever. Orochimaru too made that promise, and he too left for Konoha without looking back, not hearing his student heart shatter at another precious person leaving him. Night after night he would hope that his kidneys would finally give out and allow him to feel some sort of agony, hoping for even the littlest reprieve into the stupor brought upon by alcohol, so that he would leave the world behind for the moment and forget his worries, but there was no drink strong enough to put him down, so he took out his anger at yet another failure at getting drunk on anyone that was near him, barring Sueki. Though he would skirt around to get around the warzone that was the bar, never once taking off his mask, but always somehow finishing his drinks. Day after day he would sit on a chair by the window and stare out at the thick white mist of the village. Unmoving, cold, like he was an uninhabited shell, rigid and imperceptibly breathing. While Sueki briefly left the apartment to hunt for food and money, usually by bringing back Kiri missing ninjas and using the bounty to fuel her teacher's nightly bar hopping and binge drinking. She knew he would feel lost, and he became violent to find any kind of feeling to fill the place his motivation used to be. Yet, she refused to leave him. Naruto didn't abandon her during her darkest time, and she was not going to abandon him either. The little boy huffed and his legs visibly shook under the combined weight of both of his female friends. Sueki had her arms around his neck, forcing her face under his chin with her eyes clenched shut. The boy was carrying her in his arms and the other girl on his back, a tiny, 7-year-old Conan, mutely tightened her arms around his belly from behind and hooked her ankles at his front. The darkness-born child staggered, Conan on his back and Sueki in his arms, and it was still faster than with them walking on their feet. Naruto struggled for air with each step, and his bare feet, mud-stained feet, felt closer and closer to slipping with each movement, and yet he fought on. His arms hugged the young girl closer to him, and Conan moved slightly on his back, closing her hands into fists on his belly and gathering his shirt in her small hands. He wheezed and his mother briefly flashed through his mind, so quick anyone else would have noticed, and the boy shivered, suppressing his tears. Her bright smile and her radiant blonde hair, her impeccable grace and her unshakable stance on life. No matter what happened and what she went through, she always found a reason to smile, if it was only to lift her mood or to lift her husband or her son's mood. Tears found their way down Naruto's eyes at the thought of his mother's sunny disposition. It seemed like nothing was going to bring her down. Not the civil war in darkness, not the shinobi war going on outside and inside of darkness, and not the rampant destruction of property from the Iron Country samurai that invaded her when the Iwa arrived. She carried a shimmering smile for her son as she pulled him by his hand, guiding him, and in turn Nagato and Yahiko, after Naruto's father, who stealthily urged them to quicken their pace. Nowhere was safe and yet she smiled. Naruto grit his teeth as more tears washed down his dirty face, struggling as he moved. His mother kept repeating something to him, so occasionally that it sounded so much like a mantra. A hurried mantra to keep her precious son's spirit up in spite of the blood-soaked rubble their formerly peaceful town had become. Sueki. Konan. He whispered, amid the distant cacophony of warfare occurring to his far right. The girls didn't move at his voice. We're going to be okay. Sueki, wrapping her right arm around her teacher's lower back and fit herself under his right arm, guiding him as he listlessly trudged through the misty village. His eyes became a cold dark blue abyss of vacant darkness, walking without purpose and only directed by his loyal student. She held Naruto close and repeated those very same words he said to them over and over again so that they would never completely despair in their situation. Sensei. He didn't move at her voice, as if he had not heard her at all. We're going to be okay. They had pretty much severed their ties to AIM and their two close friends, and the girl was struggling to make ends meet by working multiple jobs, catching up to 10 missing ninjas within the water country vicinity, specifically around Kiri, and they were low-ranked, hardly worth anything at all. It was them now, as it always had been for the past 3 months. Naruto just needed some more time to find himself again, she consoled herself. We're going to be okay. The next day was different. They had been running low on cash, and Sueki had already hunted most of the missing shinobi close to Kiriagakure, so she had to venture outwards, closer to Lightning Country in search of missing shinobi, whose bounty could take them through 3 days relatively comfortably. She returned back to their humble apartment in the misty warmth of Kiri suburbs late in the night. Sensei, I'm home. The stoic red-eyed girl called from the door as she opened it. She stopped abruptly when she encountered thick darkness inside the house. Her eyes narrowed instinctively, preparing to defend herself as well as searching for her teacher. She saw a blue glint from the corner of her eyes, and her blood-red eyes shifted there, where she found a set of crystal blue eyes siding on a chair wedged in the corner of the room, beside a coffee table with a switched-off lamp on it. The only source of light in the depressingly dark room was from the window on the other side of the room, shooting streetlights into the dreary room and giving the person sitting on the chair a vague dark form. Any other feature was hard to discern, even the face, but the bright blue eyes of the person had Sueki drop her guard and fully turn to him, cocking her head to the side with her eyebrows crinkled in concern. She nodded. Hey. Naruto was silent for a moment, simply staring back at her for a long minute before he answered in a very low voice. Hey. Sueki crossed her arms, her large black featureless cloak moving with her action and showing her silver leggings and her silver gloves peeking out from her sleeves. So. Sitting in the dark, she said with a slight joking smirk. Is this a new thing or? She heard a low hum of laughter from the corner of the room and her teacher sat back, making the couch creak quietly as he did so. I was thinking about something. Sueki remained at the door, sweeping her eyes around the apartment to confirm that the place was empty besides herself and Naruto. She idly wondered whether it was his bloodline that made him more accustomed to pitch, choking blackness. About what? The blue eyes closed briefly, then reopened. Why are you still here, Sueki? The white-haired girl snorted, like the answer was obvious. 'Cause I want to be here. She walked closer to him but stopped when what she thought was his hand flicked up, telling her to stay away. I'm the student and you're the master. I've still got a lot to learn from you. Is that all? Naruto mumbled to the 14-year-old former AIM Jounin Kunoichi. Konan and Nagato can teach you whatever you want to learn. I don't know anything special I can teach you. Come on sensei, you know that's not true. She interrupted him, raising a single white eyebrow. Everything I know is because you taught them to me. Plus. Her expressionless face warmed and a tiny smile curved up on her lips, her crimson eyes deepened familiarly and some color came to her pale face. You're a very important person to me. More important than Yuhiko and Konan and Nagato? Naruto asked with narrowed, skeptical eyes. Like you won't even believe. Sueki answered easily, without pause for thought or reflection. She was glad to see her teacher speaking to her for the first time in months. Words couldn't even begin to describe what Naruto meant to Sueki, and the teacher saw this from her eyes. A pale hand reached up from his right and clicked on the lamp on the small table at his side. It was then she noticed that his famous half-mask was lying on the table, beside the lamp. Light washed over her teacher's face and the girl's eyes widened, she gasped with her hand over her masked mouth, barely stopping herself from stepping back in morbid shock. Sensei. What happened? Naruto clicked the lamp off and she could see his vague figure shrugging carelessly. I don't know. Probably has to do with my dual bloodlines. Sueki was still trying to get over what she had seen, her master's face. She could only open and close her hidden mouth in horror. The usually composed stoic teen couldn't hide the surprise in her eyes. It's been like that since after we killed Hanzo. But. Yeah, I know. I didn't want you guys to worry, so I went to ask Orochimaru if he knew what was happening. I didn't take long in Konoha. He had no idea what was happening, but I suspected it had something to do with my bloodlines. He saw the betrayal on her face and his eyes dipped down. You were still in the hospital. Nagato could have helped. Somehow. She said suddenly, then she jabbed her thumb to her chest and spat. I could have no I can help. Don't. He said with a raised hand, silencing her. This has nothing to do with my blood. He motioned at his face. It's been like this for months, so I think it won't get worse. Sueki cleared all emotions from her face, straightening up. What now? Do you still want to stay? His eyes fixed hers and gauged her reply. Yes. The hand still on the switch of the lamp slid down and picked up his half mask, putting it on so that it covered his nose and his mouth and fixing it in place. The same hand switched on the light and Naruto stood up. As you wish. He passed her and opened the door. She grabbed his elbow and asked. Where are you going? We're going to train. This time her eyes widened with excitement. Hi, sensei. The civil war in Hidden Darkness, or Dark Country, sparked up about a year after the Second Great Ninja War erupted. The country had formerly been unconcerned with a massive global war and had closed its borders for any of the conflict to flow in, but then the daimyo, a man known to have had a Konoha-born father and a Dark Country-born mother, opened the country's borders for Fire Country and began supplying them with able-bodied shinobi and their vast generational intellect to assist them in their war efforts. It was small and insignificant at first, only a few ninjas, some solid oak trees and a large basket of pure obsidian iron, but then it increased and Fire Country demanded more and more from the small nation. The daimyo caved and allowed the bigger country to influence it. Our country was rich with unique bloodline holders that were grouped into 7 distinct clans, all of whom were united under Dark Country for thousands of years. These clans had subdivisions of their different bloodlines, but the single fact was that they were all at peace with each other and had close ties with other clans for an uncountable number of years since the creation of their country. The daimyo was brought out from what was considered a royal clan, which was the clan that didn't have any bloodline of note and would have been seen as civilians if they were in any other country. The royal clan had not done anything special in the unification of the 7 clans, as they weren't considered a clan back then, and thus weren't included in the 7 clans, but the founder of the country, a dark and light release user, had appointed the cluster of bloodline-less men and women as the leaders of the country. The reason was unclear, but the 7 clans went with it out of their deep respect for their founder. The present daimyo had pretty much sold all of Dark Country to Fire Country, making the smaller country an unofficial annex of the larger and more influential country, thereby dragging Dark Country into the unexplained skirmish of the Second Great Ninja War. He had given virtually everything to Fire Country in support of the war, except any clan as a whole, and this left close to nothing for the people of darkness. Konoha ninjas populated the country and plundered civilian families and clans of what little they had, while the daimyo ordered them to do nothing about it. It was when the daimyo had signed away the deeds of an entire clan, the Kurama clan, did the civil war start. Forces loyal to the daimyo fought against the rebels, which comprised of the 7 now 6 clans. This had gone on for years and Konoha, satisfied with what it had leached out of darkness, pulled away and did nothing to stop the feuding between the royal clan and the rebel forces. Darkness was an unsafe place to live, despite the Second Great War ending after Hanzo had been killed by the 4 Akatsuki founders, with the backing of the rest of the Akatsuki. It looked like the war between the royal clan and the 6 clans would go on for years and years to come, but, some months after the end of the war, it all came to an end when 2 ninjas of unbelievable repute arrived in darkness. It was no secret that the former ghost of Aim and his loyal student were born and, for some years, bred in darkness, just like it was no secret that the ghost and his student left Amigakure and disappeared into thin air. The adoration the 7 clans had for the ghost was astonishing. The respect and admiration went beyond logic, and for good reason too. The ghost was easily a double S-rank ninja that had been able to fight Hanzo and the ninjas, loyal to the dead Cage for 7 hours straight, until the current Cage had been able to gather his wits and add his support. It was then he had been dubbed with the moniker of Ghost. Then there was the fact that the ghost was the one that had trained his higher rank student, a white-haired girl with red eyes that they also knew was from darkness. Add in the fact that the ghost was not someone to brag of his accomplishments and had been known to get off the pedestal the people of Aim placed him on to help Rain Country recover from the ravages of war. The blonde enigma was a rallying cry for the rebels, despite the ghost not stepping foot in darkness, and the royal clan saw his existence as a threat to their power, as the 17-year-old legend had never been back from Aim to Dark Country, and yet he had more adoration from the 7 clans than they could have ever hoped for. Their biggest nightmare was if the ghost made a return to Dark Country. That nightmare came to reality exactly 6 months after the conclusion of the Second Great War. The leader of the rebels, a holder of the rare Mercury release Kekai Genkai, fell onto his knees and opened his arms as the terror-inspiring blonde entered the rebel command tent. The man stared up at the teenager with his muddy brown eyes, and his guards, 5 in number, followed suit when they too recognized the person before them. He bowed his head. "Lord Naruto. You have returned." Unaware of his popularity in his home country, the blonde, half-mask-wearing shinobi raised a questioning eyebrow. "Lord." He was then filled up on how he had reached such a high status for the people of darkness. At first the rebellion had been to remove the royal clan as the leading family, but then it expanded to the 7 clans recognizing their northern neighbor, Fire Country, as the larger problem. Then news of a single shinobi killing and maiming scores of Konoha ninjas by himself reached them and was immediately tied to darkness, seeing as they found Naruto and Katsuki in their birth registries. More and more news came, in spite of the civil war, and, ever so slowly, the people of Dark Country began hailing the ghost of AIM for successfully expelling Konoha ninjas from AIM and helping to end the war. Fire Country was despised and was almost directly the cause of the civil war, and anyone that could basically bat away the leaf was a hero in their books. The 7 clans and the clanless people had resolved to ask the ghost to come back to their country when their civil war was ended. Naruto overlooked the man's enthusiastic welcome and the bowed guards and had the leader call for all of the clan heads to assemble as many of their ninjas in front of the tent. When that had been done and he exited the tent to speak to the gathered ninjas, he was forced to face the sheer magnitude of adoration the ninjas and civilians of darkness had for him. Hundreds of people were on their knees, their hands over their hearts and their heads bowed in submission. The black-cloaked man slowly looked over the multitude before him, astounded by how deep in gratitude they were for him simply being there. He looked at Suiki from the corner of his eyes and saw her tilt her head down towards him, not fully bowing, but also offering him her undying loyalty. It was humbling how much they believed in him, and it warmed his heart to think that they saw him as a source of strength. He announced to them that he was going to end the war and bring their country back to normalcy. They were to focus their attention on expelling Fire Country and any other leeching foreign country from their country, which were Earth, Lightning and Waterfall, while the other countries that had not participated or contributed whatsoever in the violence, like River Country, Sun Agakure, which was their western neighbor, Kiri Agakure and Yuzushi Agakure, were to be left alone. They would establish a formal alliance with those 4 places after the war. Naruto made sure to do his research before entering the rebel camp, like how he knew no self-respecting dark female would willingly procreate with any of those from the list of undesirable countries. There were Konoha-fathered children from women that had not given their consent to their aggressors, and no female from Naruto's detailed research wanted anything to do with the father of their children, but they would fight tooth and nail keep their children. The forced removal of the undesirables from their country was set down in history as the Purge, as darkness was essentially removing all the countries and villages that had done nothing but harm them. This action alone bolstered the people of the country to unite even more under Naruto, as they no more divided their attention between fighting the royal clan and defending their people from the undesirables. This made it faster. No undesirable was safe. If they failed to vacate the country then they would be lynched and their bloody or severely burned carcasses were left on the border for their respective countries to retrieve them if they wanted. Else their corpses would be used as manure. They did this within the span of 3 days of the, at first, mass expulsion before it became more methodical and careful so as not to accidentally kick out a future ally. As this was going on, the territory occupied by the royal clan began to reduce as more and more foreign ninjas were ejected from darkness. Their influence reduced and their manpower became less and less specialized, ranging from shinobi and samurai of low C rank to mid-A rank. The dense forest within darkness that served as the border separating them from Fire Country, at their north, regained its vitality as the nature chakra that had been lacking in the area due to systematic deforestation returned. Pitch black, soul-sucking darkness flooded the forest and animal life steadily restarted as well. The royal clan hid away in their only surviving temple, situated close to the night forest, as close to Fire Country as possible. Formerly, a great number of their forces included foreign ninjas, but lately they were all getting brutally murdered by something so quick they couldn't see it coming until their heads rolled. That was the next part of Naruto's plan. While darkness focused on taking care of the undesirables, he and Suiki would handle the royal clan. In Orochimaru's words, Naruto was a living anomaly. He had 2 naturally cooperative affinities, one of which was strong enough to be considered a bloodline, and these 2 affinities combined to form an extremely rare bloodline. Smoke release itself was not rare, as there was a whole clan in darkness that could use the Kekai Genkai, but what made Naruto's rare was that the affinities combined to make his own bloodline weren't fire and water affinities, which naturally opposed themselves to form smoke, but instead were lightning and water, of which his lightning release was also a bloodline on its own. Normally water and lightning could come together to make deadly results for any receiver, but Naruto's lightning clashed against his water to form smoke. That was something that confused the snake scientist. At first, the snake Sanin wanted to say that his student had dark release at the similarities between Naruto's smoke release and dark release, but had scratched out that summary at the obvious fact that it wasn't darkness Naruto was expelling but smoke. There was the hidden mystery of what was happening to his face under his half mask. Then there was his learning speed and thirst for knowledge. Naruto was neither a prodigy nor a genius, but he was a highly adaptive person with a quick-to-process photographic memory to boot. The amorphin had been forced to adapt by his circumstance, and so no matter the scenario Orochimaru threw at his student or put him in, the boy would only take a few seconds to adjust before he overcame the obstacle. The masked team could conjure up 100 plans and ideas to tackle a problem of any kind, whether shinobi or civilian, and yet he didn't have the patented prodigy's look, where it would seem his mind was constantly churning and spinning, thinking deeply and speaking from the soul, with a liltingly condescending tone. Naruto's clear blue eyes changed from situation to situation. To his friends and those he considered family, they held warmth. Joy so pure and welcoming that the receiver had to have the heart of Yami to not succumb to the happiness in his orbs. To his enemies and those he considered a threat, they held death. Painful, agonizing, excruciating death. No hatred, but there was manic excitement at the thought of snuffing out a pest, and so his blue eyes would darken and spin slowly, ringed with black and speaking little of the uncontrollable madness they held. No. Naruto wasn't a prodigy or a genius. Naruto was a beast. A phantom. A specter. He was the stuff that made the nightmares of enemy countries like Lightning Country. His shadowy rampage as the student of the Snake Sanin and after Orochimaru had gone gave chills to any self-respecting human being. He was the legend parents told their children at night to keep them in line. He was part of the symbol of hope for all of Amigakure. He was the symbol of unity to his home country of darkness. Orochimaru didn't know what he had trained until it was too late. Naruto was someone that could make his teacher stop and hesitate. He was silent. He was careful. He was methodical. He was the ghost. Naruto squeezed slightly on the binoculars in his hands and they zoomed in closer on the heavily protected fortress the royal clan were hiding behind, the very last of their hiding places the ghost and his student had dismantled. He counted 28 ninjas guarding the building and his eyes roved up, catching 2 sentry posts with 3 guards per post, making 34. He brought the binoculars down from his eyes and pressed his right pointer finger on the earpiece in his ear. Can you sense the daimyo inside? A sound of static answered him until, yes, I can feel the whole clan in there. Sueki pursed her lips and her eyes stayed closed in concentration. I feel like they have escape tunnels in there, maybe to Konoha. They do, ancient families like that have contingencies in case something ever happens to their power. Then why are they still in darkness when they can take the tunnels and hide in, I don't know, Konoha. It's a trap. It's a pretty risky trap, sensei, the red-eyed girl muttered. Having all of their family here and present just on the off chance they can get you. Naruto scoffed and peered through the binoculars again. No one ever said this daimyo was smart. I can sense him but not his wife or son. So he had them escape and the rest of the clan don't notice anything off. The stoic girl shook her head in exasperation. Overprivileged idiots. Naruto watched a guard rotation for a second, then he sniffed sharply. Are your senbon ready? There was a clipped click on the other side and Sueki hummed, removing a fistful of combat needles and studying the thin red substance inside the needles. Yeah. Take out the 2 sentries at the top and I'll handle the ones at the bottom. If the alarm goes off then the royal clan will flee through those tunnels. Maybe. Confirm your kills. Roger. Any questions? Just one. Why are we doing this again? Not including the major point that Naruto could murder all the member of the royal clan and their guards by himself, Sueki couldn't really see the point in ending the darkness civil war, except that this is a great way to burn time and maybe teach me a thing or two in assassinating a well-protected family. Other than that, I don't see the reason for doing this. Naruto dropped his binoculars and stored them into a large storage seal hanging on his lower back by a thin yet strong string crossed over his torso. He flexed his fingers and answered. My mum always said that no matter the nature or gravity of a problem, a child can and will always return back home. Or something like that. His eyes narrowed and he exhaled, a small burst of thick black smoke blasted from his mask. And I promised my pa that I'd come back to Dark Country, whether the war ended or not. Naruto's father didn't ask his child to make that promise, but Naruto, after listening to what had caused the civil war, swore he would return one day. It was going to be a handful now that the people recognized his power. They would most likely want him to stay back after the war. Instinctively, the blonde teacher sensed his masked student's green thoughts and chuckled with his eyes curved up in a smile. What's wrong? Underneath her half-mask, Sueki frowned, shattering her emotionless mask, and her red eyes squinted with mild annoyance. Am I not enough for you, sensei? A large, nervous drop of sweat grew on the side of Naruto's temple, and he felt that he wouldn't say the right thing, so he tactfully did something that usually worked for him on his precious student. A bribe. I'll give you extra lessons if you collect 20 or more confirmed kills. Extra training if you kill your 6 entry targets before I finish my 28 on the ground. This answer made the pale girl's eyebrows lower, her frown relax into a small easy smile. Whatever. That's the spirit. Are you ready? Ready? On 3 amusement danced in his eyes when he saw a flash of red shoot out from Sueki's position, sinking deep into a sentry shinobi's neck. The ninja turned around and swung his fist right into his comrade's face, burying his foot in his other comrade's stomach, while Sueki repeated her first action of throwing another senbon, but this time she switched places with a blood-filled needle, appearing on top of a female Konoha sentry in a burst of red chakra. Landed on the grown woman's shoulder with her feet framing the Kunoichi's head. The girl flicked 2 more needles, and they impaled the foreheads of the Konoha ninja's 2 comrades, and ended the flurry of attacks by bringing down the stunned ninja she was standing on with a stomp to the center of her head. Sueki blew out a breath and dusted her plain black cloak daintily, just as the first senbon victim finished crushing the heads of his teammates with his fists. This happened within 20 seconds. Meanwhile with Naruto, the same split second the senbon left his student's right hand he disappeared in a small plume of black smoke, fizzling into non-existence and reappearing before his first victim. He stabbed a kunai deep into the side of the man's head and left again in a burst of smoke, carving out a thick line on the necks of 3 other ninjas after 3 consecutive pops of smoke, seemingly from out of nowhere. Pomph. Pomph. Pee po pomph po pomph. Muffled pops echoed in the vacuum of silence around the royal clan's last hideout, and the resulting smoke vacated as quickly as it arrived, whereas a person would crumple onto the ground. Dead. Most of their throats slit with a precision only a practiced surgeon would know, so as to quickly bleed out the target and end their lives. It was like looking at death teleporting around the building, except this death could not be seen and was only sensed as the line of blood left their necks. One moment they were looking around and then the next they were on the ground, choking on their blood and vainly gurgling for air. No one saw anything coming until it had happened and their attacker had moved to his other targets. The last person to go down only felt a knife slide over his throat, opening up his jugular and sealing his fate. He fell down onto his face and saw a pair of feet clad in black shinobi sandals stop at his head. His eyes began closing in painful slumber as he heard his killer mumble. That's 22 seconds. I guess you win, Sue. Another pair of feet crunched up close to the first pair, this one wearing dark red sandals, and her toenails also painted an almost identical shade of red. The first person visibly leaned back as the second came closer. This one, clearly female, replied. Cool. Alright, let's go kill this guy, Naruto said, stepping around Sueki, away from his dead last victim, and his body broke up into thick black smoke, melting through the infinitesimally small crack from the sealed-shut main door. Sueki huffed and scratched her chin, wondering how she was going to get into the building without triggering the alarms. She swore quietly, barely maintaining composure, and swore to herself she would have her teacher show her how he used his hidden art. Secret smoke technique. Body smoke tunnel transformation, or at least a variation of it that would suit her bloodline. She swore once again and clambered up the wall of the fortified temple to one of the sentry posts on the top, layering her palms and feet with chakra to stick here securely with each upward leap. She landed carefully and removed a single key from the pocket of a dead sentry, using it to jiggle open the trapdoor on the floor of the sentry post and dropping inside with her crimson red eyes burning with determination. She was going to have those extra lessons from her dear teacher, even if it killed her. By sunrise the next morning, before a gathering of as many as 100,000 Darkness citizens that had traveled far and wide 2 days prior to the attack on the daimyo's fortress, it was announced that the daimyo of Dark Country, the head of the royal clan, had been ousted and the royal clan in entirety was disbanded, exiled out of the country without any money or resources to their name, as everything they owned, including the clothes off their backs, was seized by the 2 invading ninjas as they were kicked out of their home. The royal clan's estates and properties were rightfully taken back by the people of darkness, and as the very last ex-clan member of the royal clan fled the country, butt naked, the borders were closed up by high-powered seals created by the country's foremost seal masters. A week-long celebration ensued and the people of darkness, as well as the other foreign people from countries darkness did not despise, joyously celebrated the return of peace to the formerly war-torn country, not really minding the locked borders for everyone, was simply glad to be alive at the end of the terrible civil war. This 7-day party was organized by the rebel leader and the 6 clan heads, maintained from going out of control by equally happy ninjas. The day of the ousting and the 6 subsequent days were made into public holidays, named after the 2 ninjas that had ended the Civil War, though the red-eyed student graciously stepped down and gave all the credit to her teacher, for she personally wouldn't have returned if not for him. Fireworks and music could be seen and heard from as far as Sunagakur, their western neighbors and some parts of northern Fire Country. At the end of the week-long party, as thousands of people reconvened on the location the end of the Civil War had been announced, the rebel leader, with the backing of the 6 clan heads and the population as a whole, declared Naruto the new leader of Dark Country. Thanks for watching, everyone. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you want to see the next part of this series, make sure to turn on the bell notification so you don't miss it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment down below. Also, feel free to check out the other videos I've created, I'm sure you'll enjoy them too. See you guys in the next video.